Hello. It's now 11:31 a.m. on February the 11th, 2016. I'm at 47 north by 122 west latitude, Olympia, Washington. And this is a video that I probably should have entitled something like My Fellow Americans. And by that I mean also people in Mexico and Canada, Norte Americanos, as we're all in this very big boat together, and we're going to have to weather these upcoming storms together. And that's basically what this video is going to be about. It's going to be real serious. I'm going to work very diligently to not screw it up, to deliver the information in a concise and usable fashion and not get too distracted. The information is pertinent, it's timely, it'll be timely all through this year. I have to do it in a certain order because I know I know from my data that a large number of people that have never encountered my work before are going to see it for the first time as a result of this video. And so I need to let people know in advance that those of you who are familiar with it, you can just jump forward, because now I need to stop and devote a few minutes of time as to how my system works, so that the people that are new to it can get a basis and then later on go and do some more research. So I'm going to state a methodology here. I'm trying to get that hair down out of the mustache. I'm going to state a methodology here, and you can find that this methodology has been repeated in interviews I've been giving since 2000. I think maybe the first time I was on Coast to Coast, I even went into it. The methods that I'm going to describe are of my own devising. I've been doing this since 1993. There's a lot of interviews, especially a lot of audio interviews that are out there, in which I go into a lot greater detail than I'm able to at the moment. But I'm going to give you an overview as to how my system works, so that you'll feel comfortable enough to proceed with the rest of the information, and then you can go and do the research to validate it all later. When you do that research, you can start off by going and doing a hunt on Google or someplace for like WebBot forum, and go and jump to that. If you're absolutely new to this, maybe you want to get some easy entry into it, you can go look up JSNIP4 on YouTube. He's got JSNIP and the numeral 4. He's got a YouTube channel, and he's been doing summaries and has been following my work for years, and takes the time to point out where it's been effective. So now the methods. Basically what I've done is I've come to the conclusion that humans are psychic, and most of us don't know it or acknowledge it. It may cause us to make certain moves with intuition, but we really don't bring it into our consciousness. So what I did was I devised a software that's basically of 4 components. The one component are these things called spiders, which are just search engine kind of programs that go out and read web pages. And that just goes out and looks for data, and I tell the spiders what to look for. The second component is the processing that weeds out all the data that we don't want, because it brings back vast quantities of stuff that's just not useful for us. And the third part is the lexicon. The lexicon is a dictionary of words in many different languages, but it has no definitions, which is why it's really called a lexicon and not a dictionary. And what is attached to each of the words are values that are represented by numbers that go to how that word is perceived by the native speakers of that word in its emotional context. So see, basically what I'm looking for are emotional changes that show up in language. And it was always my understanding that I worked from since 1993 that these emotional changes were as a result of our psychic or intuition leaking out. And so what I've done is make a giant intuition sweeper. The way Google sweeps the internet and comes up with places for you to go and look at to respond to dinner or specific queries, what I did was to come up with a giant search engine that looks for distilled bits of intuition that end up on the internet in the form of language changes. So now, it's all done linguistically. The fourth component here, we have a database of some considerable size that runs in a language called SQL, and I'm able to do some very extensive data mining on this. And then at the other end of it, I do personal interpretation. So let me explain how that works. The data sets might bring back a collective psychic intuition. Okay, so let's choose as an example something I do not do. As a rule, I don't involve myself in personalities like celebrities, tabloid kind of things. I'm interested in a deeper level of discovery from this. So as a rule, I don't even look at, and we throw out personalities and stuff. But at the moment, I'm going to use a personality as an example because it's the stuff I don't normally do. This is actually within the data, so as it occurs over these next I want to say 6 months, but maybe it was 7 months out in model space. I have a model that I moved through time, and I did the timing and then programming and all this on my own. So it's my own mechanisms. Again, I've discussed it in other interviews. But let's get to this personality as an example so I can show you the difference between the data and the interpretation. So the data says that there's this actor by the name of Luke Wilson that's going to be involved in some form of a car wreck, a car accident. This car accident, I think, as I say, is going to occur over the next 6 months, but maybe it was out 7 months. I don't remember at the moment. I hadn't really thought at the time I saw this that I was going to use it as an example, and so I didn't make any notes about it. And I'm just doing this from memory. But anyway, so that's the data sets provide that kind of information, and it's a very concise, very cryptic, because it's just basically accident, and then under accident there's a supporting set that goes to cars, and then there's the other set that ties in Luke Wilson by name. Now, then the interpretation part is there's a lot of other data sets in there that bring back all these other words. So what I'm doing is I'm interpreting that Luke Wilson will be involved in a car accident, as the data says, but that he's not going to be a participant in the accident. He's going to be more of a witness. And so that's how he's going to show up within the referenced language. It also helps, by the way, to note that our process here brings up language that's likely to appear after the event. So I don't really get into a description of the event. I get a description of all the words we're going to be using to talk about the event after it has occurred, or after it has not occurred and we're still discussing it all. So let's get back to Luke Wilson, and then I'll give you another quick example here, and then we'll go on with the data. And so my interpretation here, the interpretation part, is that he's going to be a participant in an oblique or peripheral sense, not actually in the driving either car, that kind of a thing. And I could lay out the data that shows as to why I think that, because of these supporting sets that have legal language and some other things in them. Now, so that's the interpretation part around the actual data set showing up. So there's two components into each and every element of future forecast. Okay, so now let's look at the elements of language and how an event can occur and not occur, yet still produce the same kind of language. Let's just say we took a Super Bowl. Super Bowl happens. Everybody talks about it the media talks it up until it occurs, and then everybody talks about it for about 36 hours after that, and then it sort of falls away very rapidly. I know this from my spiders and how language moves. And so for that next 36 hours, everybody's talking about the Super Bowl, asking each other, or discussing it all, and their experiences and so on. Now, it's my contention that if the media had done their regular run-up to the Super Bowl and then it had not occurred, the day before the stadium is supposed to be used, every toilet in that whole region broke, and it was not possible to bring in any toilets, so they canceled the Super Bowl. This is a far-out example, right? And therefore, for the next 36 hours, everybody would talk about the Super Bowl that didn't happen. And so we would get the same level of language about that Super Bowl, regardless of whether the event occurred or not. And so you see our conundrum. We get language forecast, not descriptions of events. Ergo, I'm in a situation here where if I perceive that there's going to be an event, it could be that, it's going to be an event of omission as opposed to commission, in the sense of something that's missing rather than occurring. And I just can't tell the difference from the language we get, because we get the language that says Luke Wilson car wreck. and then some other legal language that and other modifiers, peripheral sets in this that lead me to suspect that he's just going to be, along for the ride in a legal sense and not really a participant. So I can make that sort of an interpretation on the data that's being presented. But in some cases, like the Super Bowl, maybe I could make a guess that it would be a situation of the Super Bowl not occurring, but within the language I might be presented, it may not be clear at all that there's any kind of a hiccup going on, because there's the same number of words, they have the same kind of things within them. You would ask yourself and talk about the same sort of situations, more or less, because in the case of a Super Bowl not happening, you would say, well, what if so and so had, done this and so on. So you'd speculate a lot more. So you see the issues that are involved at a very high level, very skimming the surface in the work I do. So, all right, so I've said that. Now, I've been doing this since 97 when I did my first run. I started working on the programming in 93. It took me a long time 4 years to do the initial work and research on this, because I had to make a living. I was working for Microsoft and GEC Marconi and all these airlines and writing code and stuff for people. That's what I was doing at the time. I was a software engineer, specializing in very large databases and data mining and interesting kinds of projects at a very high end. I program in a number of languages. My core language is C. I do some assembler. I like C a lot. C++. I don't need the overhead. I can do encapsulation. And I like Prolog. Prolog is a self-compiling artificial intelligence language, but I hate using the word AI because everybody thinks of smart, self-aware computers, which I contend cannot happen. Anyway, though. There you go. See, there was a divergence. We shouldn't have gone there. So now let's get into the situation that really brings me to doing the video. As I'd said earlier, this should have been addressed as my fellow Americans, because everybody in North America is going to suffer the same kind of circumstances that are going to, as myself, over these next few years. Our data sets suggest that these circumstances are not going to be good. In one way. I mean, they're going to be a challenge, a struggle. Now, I happen to have a philosophical approach that challenge and struggle is good. That's why we're here on Earth, to learn. And you don't learn sitting on your ass watching TV or, playing video games. You may get your twitch fingers really good, but you never really deal with any of your karma. And, well, that's all about to change. According to our data sets, we're into it right now. And if you follow anything at all, you'll, even if you're new to this work, you'll have been brought here by some occurrence in your life that impacts on some of the subjects we're going to discuss here, or is impacted by some of the subjects we're going to discuss here today. And those subjects include basically the economic underpinnings of life as we know it, eroding away visibly in front of you over these next few months and then into the rest of this year. The erosion is described in our data sets as being so fast. The collapse of all of the bubbles that the Federal Reserve and the criminalists have put together is described as happening so fast that there's major changes in society that occur at what is seemingly a blinding speed, given the usual rate at which change might occur. Now, note that the powers that be, politicians and everybody, they don't like change in our society. Politicians are followers. They follow polls. They follow the masses. They're not leaders in that sense. So they don't like change because it causes them to have to change, and they feel uncomfortable because until they get a poll reading on it, they don't know how you're going to react, and they're paranoid. So you can't trust politicians to lead anytime, anywhere, under any circumstances. And we're in a situation now where the economic bubbles are all going to pop. You'll notice this today, tomorrow, the day after, by a sudden scramble, and I mean panic, or the struggle that's going to work its way up to a panic to own gold or silver. This is going to sweep over everybody you know at some point. It doesn't matter where you are, basically, on the planet, because the collapse of the paper currency system is going to be a pandemic across all of the nations. It's going to be endemic to the society. You won't be able to escape it. It'll reach into every corner. Some people will benefit. They were smart. They knew what to do. They saw it coming. Most people will not. Most people will be caught unawares, and they will be thrown into resources or into searching for resources that they really don't have too much of a clue about. So this is not the place that you're going to get educated on how to go on out and buy gold or silver or any of this. If you're, by the time you're listening to this, if you haven't got a substantial amount of gold or silver stored relative to the amount of coins and a few dollars you've got, you may as well not even try, because it'll be too difficult to obtain, and the prices, you'll be chasing price. If you're an investor or a speculator and you have that kind of money, have at it. You have nothing to lose in terms of chasing that price, because those prices are going to go into what would be considered to be astronomical terms. And fundamentally, it all comes down to the necessary human reaction and what's going to happen that's going to cause those reactions. And so let me go into that very briefly. The powers that be that are behind the debt-based, paper-based monetary system have set up circumstances that is going to cause their minions, such as the Federal Reserve, Congress, all these people they control, to react in certain ways. The conditions exist. They've existed for a number of years, and they've been building and building until they finally got to that. I think it's Peter Schiff that uses the example. Maybe I'm incorrect, of the last snowflake, but nonetheless, the last snowflake has hit the huge mass hanging on Mount Rainier, and it started an avalanche that's going to turn into a lahar. For those of you who don't live in volcano country, lahar is a water-fueled scouring mud flow that eats out old streams and creek beds, mixes up all that glacial fill rock and sand and gravel and stuff, and comes down like cement. It moves really fast. I mean, this stuff can, it moves at the 32 feet per second, because basically it's slimy cement-like sludge that's falling down the side of a mountain. And when it hits, it's like wet cement, a whole tsunami of it. So it's really dangerous stuff. So we have a lahar coming to North America. Now, the lahar is going to affect all of us more than the rest of the planet, because we're stuck behind the dollar. We're stuck behind the powers that be and the structure that they built for the dollar that's going to cause their minions to have this specific kind of reaction. That reaction will lead to hyperinflation. And by hyperinflation, I'm specifically referring to a situation that will cause goods that you may need, dish soap, that kind of thing, to be very, very difficult to obtain, and the prices will be hard to take. I mean, the prices in dollar terms are going to be very difficult to deal with. And this is also going to involve, because of the way that this crash is going to occur, and this is really the reason why I'm doing this video at the moment, is that there's a very considerable chance, I don't want to use that word, there is a huge potential in the energy sense, in the electrical sense. We've got a very large potential that the just-in-time delivery system will come to a grinding halt all across North America. If that should occur, and I'm going to actually start saying when that occurs, the conditions that you'll face will be that the stores will empty and they will not be refilled. And you'll go back to that store 2 days after you went and bought milk, and there won't be any milk. You'll go back and they'll say, well, we'll get some in a few days. And the fact of the matter is that they won't. And then perhaps even 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days after that, the employees won't even show up. We don't know how it's going to actually mature at the individual level, and it's going to really depend where you are and how much of the material that you use in your life is locally sourced. Because we've gotten a situation where everything that travels over the roads to get to the stores that you consume is basically riding there, floating there on a sea of paper debt credit. The guy, when he fuels up his truck to drive the goods from the supplier, secondary supplier, over to Walmart, he fuels his truck up on a credit card that runs on credit. He doesn't actually carry cash to make the purchases that get him from one part of the country to the other with that load of goods to go into the Walmart. He personally uses credit card more often than not, purchases everything that way, and he's with the vast majority of people in the country. And it's not necessarily, there are going to be instances when these cards, the plastic, will not work, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about now in terms of the dysfunction that's going to occur. because the dysfunction that's going to occur is the lack of credit that allows people to purchase things ahead of time and bank on being able to pay that creditor when the goods have sold. That whole credit system is going to break down, and then there's the issues of the huge amount of capacity to move goods, but no demand. So it's got us into a situation where even the basics will now be threatened, and that's something that we all need to be aware of. I'm not saying that you should panic. I'm not saying to run on out and try and stock up on canned goods. I don't know that that's the solution. It's going to depend on where you're at as to how bad it might get for you at an individual level. You're going to have to analyze your individual circumstances for your financial capability to deal with sudden rising prices and unavailability of items. And then make some adjustments in terms of where you think you'll be 6 months out and a year out. And you'll know I'm correct if you're looking at this either ahead of time or later on, because you'll see that we're going to run into a situation of panic to purchase gold and silver and ultimately Bitcoin. Gold and silver is going to produce, that panic will be visible. You'll be able to see videos, and it'll even hit mainstream media, of people queuing up all around the planet to purchase gold and silver, and a lot of people behaving badly in mobs when they're not able to get some because the store will have to ration it because they won't have anywhere near the amount that the demand is going to seek. So prices will rise. Prices will rise fast. Prices will rise continuously. Prices may jump up and down the way that prices usually do. But for the gold and silver, we're going to get into a situation that's going to be, in my lifetime, absolutely unique. And I'm an old bastard. And so that uniqueness is going to be a situation that my data suggests will occur in March and April, in which people will want to buy gold and there will be none offered. And so, for instance, right now, I think gold might be $1,200 or $1,300 an ounce to actually get some in your hand. Well, maybe by April, you might see a situation where someone's offering to buy it at $2,000 an ounce. Nobody's selling it. You know, they're saying to themselves, I'm not going to sell my ounce of gold for 2,000 bits of paper. And so they might say, well, we'll offer you 5,000 bits of them paper, you know, or who knows? We just don't know where it's going to go, because the course of the no offer is going to totally destroy the artificial suppression that's occurred that I know for a fact has been in place at least since the year 2000 and has likely been there since the 70s. But there's documented evidence that, you know, of the gold suppression and the silver price suppression since the 2000 at least. So under those circumstances, we're going to get this panic to own the gold and silver. That will tell you that I'm correct about what else is going to come. That'll eventually trail down to Bitcoin. When people realize they can't get gold and silver, there will be this surge to buy Bitcoin, and we won't see it because it's going to be online. You can go and look at like Fiat Leak and watch it occur. This could be global. We're going to see currencies all over start taking really big swings in volatility. What we call wobble. That was what the data called it, a wobble. We're going to have a wobble for the dollar. It's just going to bounce around like that. And as it bounces around, confidence is going to be lost. Because every time it comes down, the populace is going to have one emotional reaction, and then as the Fed drives the price back up with their manipulation, the populace is going to have another reaction, and they'll go along with it. The popular reaction will be okay on the first bounce back up, but not that second one. From then on, confidence is totally shot. But the dollar's still going to wobble as it fades off into history. If you're in North America, you're going to have to deal with the destruction of the currency that has moved my entire life. It's moved me through this planet my entire life. And it's going to be gone, effectively gone, especially as purchasing capacity dries up, because the response of the minions will be to hyperinflate. They don't have any other tools. They don't know anything else to do. They're really, really, really dumb. All these people at the top, they're just clever criminals, and there's a criminal system you live under, and that's why these really stupid people are running everything. And I cannot tell you how absolutely stupid these people are. But the system has got us locked in at an individual basis. That's going to change. The system is actually coming apart at the seams. Now, as this occurs, let me check my notes here. we're going to get to the situation here where, as I say, gold and silver will go no offer. The data shows shortly before that Bitcoin is reaching around 650 US dollars per Bitcoin. It's going to go much higher than that. But it's because the dollar is becoming worthless, not that these things are more valuable. Their value will now be recognized. There's another key difference, is that yes, there will be a fundamental change in the nature of gold and silver, because gold and silver in and of themselves are just rocks, just minerals, and they can't do anything. There's no emotional component there. There's no life as we understand it within those rocks. But what does motivate and move gold and silver around the planet is the human reaction to it. And that is to say, the perception that humans have for value in these rocks will change very radically as the perception that they and faith that they used to put into paper now shifts to something a little bit more solid and substantial. And so everybody will want these rocks and will give up on paper. And as I say, a little joke, and rock, paper, scissors is a game. Okay, in real life, rock wins every time. Now, we've been surrounded by paper, just metaphorically. Rock's been surrounded by paper for a long time, and now that paper is just burning off. Okay, so let's set us up for the projections for the rest of this year, and then get on to the hopefully the end of this video. All right, so we have a situation where we're going to have panic to own gold and silver, long lines, people behaving badly. We're going to get to the point where the just-in-time distribution system, and I'm talking specifically North America here. I don't have time in this video to devote to data sets outside of that parameter. We have a just-in-time delivery system crumbling. We have stores shuttering, people going home because they don't have any employment. We'll have all of the ATMs and other problems as the electronics give us a bit of an issue. And then we're going to have weather problems that are going to be quite severe this year. And so those weather problems are going to be very severe on the southeast in August through probably to the first part of October. And they're going to be very severe on the west coast from our abnormally warm spring all the way through an abnormally warm summer. Now, there's one caveat to this that I've got to put in place before I continue. If, and we don't have anything in the data to suggest that this will occur, but there is a small level of potential that it might. If the dollar system crumbles rapidly enough, the geoengineering, the weather modifications that you see every day, if you look up and look at the sky and see the planes spraying those white trails around that everybody calls chemtrails, if the dollar fails fast enough, that'll stop, and it'll stop very rapidly. There is a suggestion in the data from years ago that did have some potential even years ago. So we do have some small growth in that area now within our model space. And it could happen that way. And so that may be an exacerbating component to this, is either the ratcheting back of the weather modification because nobody can afford the price of kerosene to put into the jets to fly them back and forth, or it may be that the chemtrail program collapses very rapidly. Now, regardless of that, or without regard to that, the data set is growing there around a very hot, abnormally so, basically a big pool of heat that captures the west coast and sits around the west coast of the U.S., all the way from Baja well up into southeast Alaska. And it's a heat that's going to be crushing at points later in summer. Well, again, we'll know I'm correct if we have this very abnormally warm early spring, and that just doesn't fade the way that it usually does around here. If that's the case, then we'll get into this situation where we're going to have the problems from the heat, and we'll know months in advance. Now, it could be that they're able to maintain the chemtrailing up to a certain point, and then the chemtrailing suddenly collapses, and then we get into the heat very rapidly. I just have no way of telling how it's going to manifest. So if we have if we don't have this abnormally hot or warm spring on the west coast, but it's just regularly warm, and we have lots of chemtrails, then bear in mind this forecast still has a lot of potential to come true as long as the underlying economic destruction is ongoing, because at some point they won't be able to afford to put the fly ash slurry into the air. and that's going to stop the chemtrails, and then the heat's just going to very rapidly escalate. And when that occurs, a number of effects are going to occur within the social order and within the environment, as may be expected, and we're all going to have to deal with these. So I'm not trying to pimp my report or anything like that. We're all gonna live through this, and my reports at my accuracy level is better than chance. I figure I'm at least 50% of all of the predictions either come out accurately and on time, or accurately and off time. So chance would have it be about 20 to 24%. So under the circumstances, you're going to have to decide how you're going to deal with a situation where we have a heat wave on the west coast that may extend inland some considerable distance and into the southwest that might cause severe problems for your environment, especially at a time when electricity may not be all that reliable. See, all this stuff's going to hit us all at once. The broken credit system is going to destroy the just-in-time delivery system, which includes fuels for power plants, which produce electricity to produce the electricity you need to keep the air conditioning on. And at the same time, we're going to have, it's going to be exceptionally hot. And you're going to have to rely more on that air conditioning and or whatever cooling you've got, and you're going to find it's difficult to get around because a lot of the infrastructure around you is starting to basically react to an overly heated sun, and you're just sort of not really prepared to deal with it because you've been kept in sort of a little geoengineering cocoon for the last few years that may rapidly disappear. Now, I happen to think we've got to, I like taking my pain right now and getting it over with, right? I don't want to delay pain. If there's pain, I want to eat it, as the Taoists say. Eat your pain now, and get that karma out of you, and get past it. So I want the geoengineering to go away, but I need to advise everybody that I'm very realistic about what's going to happen when that does. It's not going to be very pleasant, and we have to adapt. And so there's going to be a lot of adaptation going on. And this is the other component of this. The good part of the reports that we've had here for the past few years have been saying that basically we're in a renaissance period, long delayed, that's been held in abeyance by the manipulation of the economic system. If the economic system had collapsed in '87, we would be into just such a kick-ass renaissance now. It would not matter that the environment is radically changing, because we would have already started adapting in the early '90s, that kind of a deal. But we've been held in this artificial cocoon of control that has been trying to preserve their control, and the cost to all of us was that there hasn't been an acknowledgement of the real changes in which we're actually living. Change happens, people. We got to get there. Got to understand this. So we're now in a situation where the confluence of events is going to bring all of this and put it on our plate here, and I think we're going to get all this hitting us around July, just as hyperinflation really kicks off. And by hyperinflation, I mean very stupid, dumb people that run things in the criminal system that has got us all locked into control will respond to the economic crisis as expected, and will print vast quantities of digital dollars until they just can't print anymore, until it just doesn't make any more sense and no one's listening to them. And so we might see, numbers being invented, quadrillions or something, for new kinds of numbers, because we're printing them out so fast that we make Zimbabwe look like pikers, look like they had no vision on how to hyperinflate. We got some really stupid people running things. Now, the good part of all of this is that as the paper debt collapses, we're going to get back to what's known as sound money, which is these rocks I'm talking about, gold and silver, and the new electronic rock that is Bitcoin. When we do this, you'll find that the social order changes around you. And it is because there is a new ethos, because you can't fuck people over in gold and silver deals and live to walk around, right? I mean, it's like you got to get real with things. The people with the paper money system have done everything they can to put layers and layers and layers and layers of minions between themselves and any justice at all. That goes away with the paper debt system. All the politicians go away with the end of the paper debt system. Who gives a rat's ass about that old fart Hillary or hair boy Trump when there's no dollars behind them? When Trump's casinos are empty, or not empty, where they just have thousands of squatters living in them, and because the economic system has collapsed and those people's homes were washed away in the storms, they saw the casino and they said, hey, I'm going to go live there. Up yours, Trump. And by then, no one gives a rat's ass about Trump anyway. That's the kind of world we're going to be getting into. As it may actually come to the point where the, quote, federal government does not have the money to front an election. It will come to the point, and we'll start seeing that within our data, it shows us anyway, that we'll come to the point by August that we'll recognize that the moral bankruptcy as well as the physical or actual economic bankruptcy of the two major parties. So hooray, the political oligarchy and dictatorship that we've lived under, it's gone. It's dying in 2016. I don't vote. It's a mug's game. They've got everything rigged. And it's rigged because they're going to present you two people and they're going to say that this is the best that America has to offer. Hillary Clinton, the whore for the elite, or Donald Trump, the other whore for the elite. That's the best that America has to offer. No. I got better people here in Olympia than either of those two. So, sorry, didn't mean to get into that. Anyway, so here's where it's at, guys. It's going to be really harsh for us this year, and something you have to pay attention to now, if you've got any inclination at all, is gardening when it counts. I think there's even a book by that name, like Gardening When You Have to Depend on It, or Gardening When It Counts. And that's where we're at now. That's why I'm bringing this up, because food's going to be an issue. It's not going to be a question of, how much you're going to pay for that tomato. It's going to be a question of, do you have that tomato out of season? Probably not. Not if you're not figuring a way of growing it next year. So that's the route it's going to go. You're going to learn a whole lot about food, because it's going to be a very key issue as we go forward. We live in a hugely resource rich environment that's been kept from us by the paper debt system. And we now have to learn to explore that hugely rich environment around us in really creative ways, because the paper debt system is coming down. Without that, you've got to figure ways to make yourself an asset to universe, because otherwise you're a liability to everybody. And in a harsh world like that, liabilities go quick, and you don't want to be in that group that goes quick. So, hang on a second. Green smoothie here. So you're going to need to figure ways to be self-reliant, to take responsibility, to take personal responsibility for your interaction with others. To recognize that you're going into what we can now call a sound money situation, where you'll get paid for as you produce in universe. If you offer value, you will find that universe rewards you. Unlike the paper debt system, where if you don't offer value, universe, and you're a criminal, universe has rewarded you. Well, that system's gone. Universe is tired of that. We've learned what we could from it. Now it's time to get rid of it. In any event, so gardening when it counts, get to it, get creative. It doesn't matter to me if you live in the middle of a highly urbanized environment, as long as you've got electricity. And you can figure actually that some things in some areas, electricity will just keep going. Other areas not. It's just going to be, depending on the luck and where you live and how many people are in there and how scared the government is of electricity riots and this kind of thing, right? And so you may not get an electrical bill. You may get to the point where who is it, like Con Ed? I don't know if that still exists in the Northeast, but you may not get a bill from your electric utility for years once this stuff starts happening. And they may still keep the power on simply because the government is too afraid. Those people in power are too afraid to turn it off, or to allow the natural course of events to have that power company shut down. And so there will be some things that will, by nature in some areas, a lot of it driven by fear, become de facto public institutions in a serious way. So if you've got electricity, talk to your local pot growers. Figure out how to grow things indoors under lights. Especially good as long as they're spraying the chemtrails. You don't really want that aluminum and the barium and the strontium and the other crap they're putting up there down on your food anyway. That's why I've got a grow dome, so we don't, in a dome, a geodesic dome with plastic over it, so we don't get all the chemtrails, because they put tons of the stuff in the air here because it blows east where they want it to go. So anyway, gardening when it counts, be creative. You can grow tons of food in small spaces. You'd be really amazed. If you get into things like biointensive, go look up biointensive. You can find that you can grow a full year's diet in 1,100 square feet per person. even smaller if you're doing it indoors under high energy conditions. More continuous, better crops, etc. If you need hints, go to places like Permies, Permies. I think they're a .org, Permies.org. It's permaculture. People there have been doing this stuff for years. They can guide you. It doesn't have to cost money. You can find most of the materials. We're in a resource-rich environment. Even in an urban area, you can find areas where you've got sunlight and all the conditions that you can then, or most of the conditions that would then allow you to do something, drape plastic over a balcony and you've got an instant greenhouse, that sort of a thing. So it's going to come to that. Look to the what happened to Cuba as your model, because that's going to be basically what's going to be happening to all of North America over these next few years. We're into the periods of struggle. It started this year, January 1. It started just if you paid attention to the stock market, it started there with very ominous sign, portents of the future, all of that. And so we're into the years of struggle. It's a decade. We'll be doing this for the next 10 years. The first 4 years are going to be really rough. That's when most of the people that are going to die from this will perish, is in those first 4 years. So if you make it through these next 4 years, the odds, so to speak, are increasingly in your favor. There are going to be a lot of people that are flourishing. They're going to flourish in this period of time because it's their nature. You may want to, latch on into their sphere of influence, because there's creative individuals out here that are going to respond in a very positive way and create whole new social movements and means, and in some cases, economic empires, because they'll know how to do things and will respond appropriately, and the universe will reward the fact that these guys have done that. It's going to be very difficult for everybody. Let me see the last on notes. Okay, so gardening when it counts. Weather's going to be a problem. Be prepared to do all of your gardening and stuff indoors. It doesn't matter if you're east, west, north, or south. There will be some kind of a condition that will impact you in a negative fashion that indoor gardening may make more sense. In some areas, power, when it goes, it won't be coming back. It's just going to be, at least not in any meaningful fashion. So just be advised of that. There are going to be areas that, according to our data, that lose power regionally, and then it's a struggle for years for them to get up to the point where they have reliable power again. I don't have any sure guidelines on where that might be, and I don't offer any suggestions to anybody on where they should go live, because that's personal karma. As I say, I could tell you, oh yeah, go live in Denver, Colorado, and you get there and the second day you're hit by a truck and killed. It's entirely personal karma. So, don't ask me where universe wants you to live, ask universe. And then if you're dependent on medicines, be advised that you should look into that. See if there are substitutes, see if you can stockpile. There will be shortages in some medicines for some period of time. Over the next 10 years, it's going to be a little bit spotty. Now, on the other side of that, there's good news in the data sets that say that the Renaissance is going to hit North America. We're going to really blossom, that once we get rid of this paper debt monster, the zombie octopus banks that are vampire squid things sucking our blood and life, mixed metaphors all the helling on there. Once they're gone, the Renaissance really blooms here, and we come out stronger, in some ways much more cohesive, and in the end, North America, or not in the end, but over the next 10 years, will come to dominate and offer to the planet some things that don't exist now. A plethora of North American-based bioreactive agents in the forms of new medicines that will be developed here that basically couldn't have evolved, couldn't be built anywhere else, simply because of the plants and mineral structures that have evolved here. That's going to happen. Also, data showing that we're going to get into new kinds of businesses that may include, George Jetson kind of cars, anti-gravity kind of floating around vehicles, which I personally would like. That'd be really cool. Actually, dozens of things are pointed in our data sets have been in reports for years, new electrics and this kind of stuff. So we'll get right down to it in terms of my report and stuff, because I'm going to wrap this up here. I offer these reports at $15. There's enough discussion on them in the WebBot forum that if you didn't want to spend the money, you could probably go there and ask people, and they could probably tell you certain things that are going on. We have to be relatively careful about encouraging the republication of our material, because it causes circuitous loops if our spiders pick up our own material, and it causes problems within the data, and I actually have to spend probably 18-20% of my time screening all that crap out. And it's a constant chore. So I don't really advise people to discuss that in that fashion. But if you can't afford the report, I'm certain you can go and learn what you need to from the people that are discussing it in places that we've got like cordoned off, like the WebBot forum and stuff. Now, note, I don't involve myself in that forum. I never go there. I don't run it. It's none of my software, not on any of my servers. I just don't have the time to get involved in any of that sort of stuff. Any new information I get on a pertinent to the moment kind of thing, I usually post on Twitter. When Twitter goes down, I'll probably put it on Google Plus, or post it on my own site, depending on what's happening at the moment. And I guess that's about it. Sorry it took so long to get through this. There's only 6 items here, really. But now's it's actually happening, guys. Now the economic system's coming unglued around us. It's pretty certain that you'll see it in the next few weeks or months, and you'll come and probably end up finding this video as a result of that, and get redirected here and there based on your particular interest here. But the earlier you recognize you're going to have to be more self-reliant than you've been in the past, the better. The better it will be for you as an individual and society at large. I don't want to be too preachy or anything, but try and take care of at least one other person than yourself. That makes you a little bit more valuable to the universe, and the universe has a tendency to compensate. And learn to grow food and do it well, or wild sourcing or whatever. There's other ways to add value. So the people that will, for instance, go and repair appliances because we won't have new ones, they'll get food that way because they know how to make a washer work, that kind of thing. Or the person who makes soap and trade it for veggies. Anyway, good luck to us all. I'm sure that everybody loves hearing all of this kind of stuff, but it's unfortunately it's necessary, and the life of as I always say, future forecasting is its own punishment, right? The only sin involved is accuracy. That's just the way it is, guys. Talk to everybody later.